Hi and welcome back to the Academy of Historical Fencing. I'm Nick Thomas, and today we're going to be going through the lines and the disengage. So when it comes to the lines, it's a simple means of describing which side of the swords that we are on in relation to the opponent and in terms of where we're striking. So the reason you need to know the lines and really know them is that as far as communication goes, particularly when you're learning or teaching, you have to be able to explain things in inside and outside line. And it's important, therefore, that people understand what they are very, very quickly when you're learning to do British military swordsmanship. And they do translate to quite a few other styles as well. Anyway, so the inside and outside line is where you are in relation to the sword, which side, and the disengage is moving from one side to the other, which is why I'm linking them together. So the disengage is just going from one side to the other, which can be done over or under, and the lines are the inside and the outside line. Now, if you are my opponent, my inside line is, the easiest way to think of it is my front, and my outside line is my back. You can also think of it that the inside is where the offhand is. So this is my inside, that would be my outside. And if I'm left-handed, still my front, this is my inside, that would be my outside. But specifically, it relates to the blades, so that if you attack me this side of my blade, so on my inside where my offhand is, this is the inside. There you go. And if you attack that side of the blade, which will come down to my backside, not literally, and not where my hand is, that is the outside. So it doesn't matter which guard I'm in. So if I'm in inside guard, for example, this is my inside, that's my outside. Outside guard, this is my inside, that is my outside. Okay, so it's a simple concept, but it's really important in terms of language, so that we can explain cut on the inside, thrust on the outside, things like that. I mean, there are more specific terms. Obviously, there's numbered and named cuts and thrusts, but it's really useful sometimes to just say attack on the inside, that kind of thing. So that's it, your inside and your outside line. Now, in terms of the disengage, as I said, can be done under and it can be done over the opponent's blade. And Roworth does say that you usually disengage over for cuts and under for thrusts. And again, it is literally usually. There are exceptions to the rule. There always is. But the reason for that is it can be to do with guards, but mostly it's to do with a cut. You need a bit of power generation. So if you drop under a blade and try and cut, you don't have a lot of power. Now, there are obviously ways of doing that. If anybody familiar with, say, Balinese swordsmanship will be used to doing things like this. So you basically drop under, power up, and strike around. So there are ways, of course, to disengage and get power. But we would normally lift and go over the blade before we then strike. And you notice that then you get power generation. It's not huge rotational power, but it's powerful enough, trust me. And particularly if you use a handshake or thumbs up type of grip, or go into it as you're striking, you should find that from a relatively vertical sword position, you can snap in plenty of power from there. And as ever, with this style of swordsmanship, we're always thinking about, we are always aiming to have the hilt and the force of our blade in front and protecting us, so that as a rule we are essentially pivoting always around on the wrist. So as a general rule, the hand is always out in this position, whatever we're doing, so that this is all protecting us. And that means we're not going to, for example, bend the elbow and come back like this. If you wanted to do that cut, you would just rotate and use the wrist. And so when you disengage, it's really important that you're covered, because it's a great opportunity to strike against somebody with timed shots. So being covered, remember, that is just being protected against the opponent's blade, which generally just means putting the edge of your sword towards theirs and with enough alignment of your hilt that they can't hit you. So you remain as covered as possible, because during the disengage you are vulnerable. For that moment that you are disengaging, you aren't covered. So it's important that you're fast with it, that you use a small range of movement, and that you keep the actual part that's protecting you out in front. Usually when people start doing disengages, they tend to start by using the shoulder, and they just move the sword like this. Okay, that's a really slow disengage, which exposes the hand and just everybody sees a mile off. It's just, that's not what we want to do. It is just from this position, it is just this pivot action from the wrist or over the top. Okay, so you don't need to be doing huge movements. It's just enough movement to get around their blade. So, if you're going to be doing cutting actions, remember we can start with our tip anything from vertical to pointing towards our opponents, which is, it's shown both ways throughout the manuals of Roworth, and there are reasons to do both. So whichever way you want to start, we're going to lift up to a vertical position. So if you started in vertical, well, you're not really going to be doing much other than rotating the hilt a little bit or moving the hilt a little bit. But if we start with the point forward a little bit further, lift the point, bring it over to the other side, and then do your strike. And if we are going to use point work, it is as simple as drop the point and come up the other side. Now, when you disengage, you should be forming a new guard position which covers you, or attacking. And what that means is, in terms of covering, is turning the front edge of your sword towards theirs and forming a protective guard. So that if I am on the inside, the opponent's blade will be here, and I want to disengage to the outside, I would drop the tip, disengage, and form the outside guard, so that I'm covered. You don't want to disengage and stay in the same guard position, because as you can see, if I'm in inside here and the opponent's blade is here, I disengage it, I've got no protection down here anymore. So when you disengage, go to a guard that protects you, and it usually means changing from one side to the other, because again, he doesn't like the medium guard, so don't use that one for Roworth. And therefore, yeah, when you're disengaging, you're most likely to go from outside to inside, and well, that's the most common version. You can, of course, disengage hanging guards and stuff like that as well. In terms of practicing it at home, all I would suggest is doing some lunging exercises that start with a disengage and then have an attack. You can, of course, do it from a fixed guard position, because in a fight, people will do a cat and mouse game of disengage, counter, disengage, trying to find the optimum position for their attack or whatever. But you really want an opponent to be able to do that against. If you're going to practice this at home, I suggest just throwing in the cuts I've already shown you. I know I haven't shown you any thrusts yet, but I will. But for now, you can just drive the point forward. It doesn't really matter. You've got nothing to oppose at this stage, no blade to oppose. So you can, from here, drop the point, go into inside guard, and lunge. Recover to guard. Always remembering to recover to a strong guard. Disengage, strike, and likewise we can, from our positions here, we can, for a cutting action, lift the tip and strike. Okay, and it is as simple as that. And again, remembering to oppose the opponent's blade. So if I'm in inside guard here and I lift the tip, I'm likely to now strike cut 2. And if I'm in outside guard, I lift the tip, likely to strike cut 1. So again, it turns the edge of the sword both onto the target, and also our guard stays there to protect us. So that is the lines, and that is the disengage. That's a really simple exercise that you can do, because when you're actually in sparring, you're not likely to just launch a cut straight off and expect it to land, unless you are particularly quick or your opponent is particularly slow. You're likely to do something to initiate, and a disengage is one common action which starts your attack. So use your 6 cuts, start in a guard position, mix them up, start in all the different guards, start with a disengage, and then do a cut or a thrust. So that is lines and the disengage. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please do subscribe if you haven't already.